Hello and namaste. Welcome to today's Nugget of Zen. On today's episode, the subject of awakening. Greetings and salutations. Thank you for tuning in. It is Monday, April 26th. It's 2:35 p.m. I've had a very productive morning getting ready for this week. So I didn't do a podcast in the morning. I apologize for that. But here we are with today's Nugget of Zen, a subject which I am deeply concerned about. The growing, spreading, and in my opinion, tragic misunderstanding, misapplication, and misconstruence of the term awakening. Now, before we proceed, I'm going to tell you right here and right now, I have never claimed to be enlightened. I have never claimed to be woke. I think that the woke slang isn't explicitly about like the spiritual terminology, but it's sort of flowing in that same direction. I've never claimed to be awakened or to have achieved awakening. My concern, and I hope I don't come off as judgy, because that would be, the exact opposite of the solution to this concern. But my concern is that there seems to be an exponential growth in the number of people on social media self-congratulating themselves, patting themselves on the back, and extolling from their virtual rooftops that they have achieved enlightenment. Now, before I sound like I'm contradicting myself, I am firmly confident that a great awakening is happening. No, it is not the great awakening of Trump and the Q delirium. That's clearly, painfully, and quite obviously a distraction. It's a distractionary measure that is draping itself in some of the synthesized language. In other words, they've taken it and synthesized it into their own twisted purposes of spirituality, of Christian mysticism, and of nationalistic political religious ideology, and merged it all together into a big clusterfuck of psyop, in my humble opinion. There is a great awakening, though. I am not a naysayer. I am, fundamentally, a skeptic. That doesn't mean I'm a denier. That doesn't mean I'm a troll. That means I don't jump in to any barrel with my eyes closed and trusting on blind faith. The only thing I give my blind faith to, ironically, is the cosmos itself. And we'll talk about that in a hot second. Awakening is not taking an online course and suddenly achieving some extra deluxe special entitlement status that gives you the authority to sit in judgment over others in false piety. I mean, and that's what I see happening, right? I see people who claim to be awakened and be enlightened, and in the same breath utter statements that to me, from my perspective, seem to be clearly and obviously engineered ego trap manipulative, neurolinguistic, misleading content. The confusion, I think, stems from a lack of clarity about what awakening actually is. So let's take a moment, because I'm feeling tight and snappy today, like we're going to really hit our goal to keep the show under 2 hours. Let's take a moment, because DJ Zed is over there grinding his gears and ready to play you a little bit of music. Here is Meditation. Oh, I already just played that. Dang it! I was excited because it's a Nugget of Zen episode. We do a little meditation themed song, but we just played that in the last episode. Let's do Fundamentalist Stratum, a trap groove pad 101 audio entertainment loop track for you. Awakening. That's what we're talking about today on today's Nugget of Zen. What is it? Why are so many people claiming to have achieved it? Let's discuss. First things first. From my survey of my admittedly limited social media circle, or circle of circles, I see a lot of wildly varying definitions of what awakening is. Now, in a counterintuitive move, I'm going to agree with that to a certain extent. Sounded like I was going to argue against that, right? Here's the thing. As is attributed to the Buddha, there's a bit of ancient wisdom. Who knows where it actually comes from? It's attributed to the Buddha. In response to a question from a student, the teacher says, there are as many paths as there are pupils, for everyone's unfolding is unique. And this is true. I think multiple things can be true at once, and that's that we can also radically misunderstand, misconstrue, misuse the word awakening. There's no great surprise that there's confusion about it, because even a cursory survey of the kinds of content you could find looking up the term awakening, points to various. What am I trying to say? You'll find content that in its discussion about awakening will point to various ancient sources, right? And even from similar traditions, like the spectrum of varying schools of thought on the idea of Zen, which there are many, right? And they often radically disagree. There are also overarching themes that unite. So there's plenty of cause for confusion. For example, there's the understanding that awakening, and this comes from again another statement that's attributed to the Buddha. After having being asked by a student, "What have you gained?" the answer is nothing. But he can tell the student what he's lost. That's an ambiguous, and you really got to work at unpacking what all that means. But it also is quippy and memeable and sort of feels like you get it right away. Some people get it, some people don't, and it's not about judging one way or the other. The concern I have, and the thing I'm trying to parse out, is that despite the natural room for error or confusion, beyond that, there seems to be this almost systematic, because I keep seeing really eerily similar statements cropping up from different groups and different communities and different users. But there seems to be this growing flow of misleading statements and innuendo and sort of, weird theses. I've never been able to conjugate that word cleanly. Theories is slightly different, but similar enough. We go with that word. That ultimately boil down to being, misinformation, in my opinion, about, and it's being circulated increasingly more and more commonly in social media about awakening. And at the center of my concern is that so much of it seems to just reek of ego trap, because invariably there seems to be some modifying clause in these eerily similar talking points that keep cropping up everywhere in communities of spiritually inclined people that invoke a statement of judgment against those who are not awakened. Now, there's a deeper problem than just that, but that alone should be a huge red flag. An awakened person, no matter how pleasantly worded or phrased, sitting in spiritual judgment of others for not being as special as themselves, that is not the way. That is not the path. That is not the Zen that the Buddha was pointing to, I think, in my humble opinion. Why? Because ego seems to have infiltrated those thoughts, sentiments, and ideas and constructs that are being, increasingly shared in a trending way, to include ego trap logic that is incongruent, in my humble opinion, with genuine and authentic spiritual progress along the path of enlightenment. Now let's zoom back. Let's zoom out. Let's get really meta here. The biggest problem, despite the fact that, if you're so awake, if you're so awakened, if you've achieved enlightenment, why are you, even in a sort of sheep's and wool's clothing, so surreptitiously sitting in judgment of others, which is sort of supposed to be the first sin that we are healed of when we make progress towards enlightenment. The bigger issue is this, and here I get a lot of people getting really irate and falling back to playground taunts and petty insults when I point this out. Despite the interesting array of claims to, statements of here is what awakening means, despite the growing popularity of articles about awakening and all that kind of stuff, and the growing commonness of people talking about their own awakening, it seems from my survey of such things and my various attempts to have public discourse with folks that present themselves this way and self-identify this way, there seems to be a really deep and fundamental lack of familiarity with the root origins and deep ancient definitions of awakening. And to summarize, and by all means, look, I'm the first one to tell you, I'm not pretending to be an expert. I don't have a PhD in Zenology, right? Like the study of Zen. I don't have a doctorate in jack shit. I should have a doctorate in technical theater and in directing, but womp womp, I'm a big fat loser. At least I was in my teens and early 20s. I digress. That's neither here nor there. One of the reasons I didn't do so well in school is because I was always juggling my extracurricular interests and favoring them a bit heavy-handedly. And organized religion, vis-a-vis the lens of the factual historical development of these societal constructs, is one of those subjects that I've been fascinated since the age of like 8 or 9. The flip side of that coin is even higher on my list of priority subjects that I've been interested in and have devoured whatever content I've been able to get my hands on about since I was about the age of 9. Okay? And I'm not trying to brag. I'm just stating a fact. I will acknowledge right here and right now that my comprehension, understanding, and therefore my explanation may be as flawed as anybody else's. Because here's a critical fact. Everybody's making it up as they go along. That's something that, although I don't think the Buddha ever said it exactly, you get the understanding out of the cumulative impact of Buddhist teachings, is that ultimately it's like, your simple little human sentence brain cannot wrap its own little tiny cognitive abilities around the grandeur and the majesty and the divine splendor of what's actually going on. So our words will always fail. Okay, having disclaimered all that, here is what I understand, to the best of my understanding after lifetimes of fascination with the subject, what the actual meaning of awakening is, as exemplified throughout human history by the enlightened ones. And that is the transmutation of the human individual into the next evolutionary stage of the species development into initially a sort of crossover bridge hybrid form of transmuting the material body into a ethereal body of pure light consciousness. Yeshua Christos rose up out of the grave because his body had been transmuted into light. The Buddha vanished at the end of his life because his body had been transmuted into light. They were awakened. They had achieved that actual thing that is truly, genuinely, originally meant by the term awakening. Therefore, and this is not a judgment statement, what I'm about to say. I'm not sitting in judgment. I'm trying to remind people that this can be confirmed through your own spiritual work. If you are here, as I am, right? I'm not claiming to be awakened or enlightened or a being of light. Not yet. Not any more so than the human animal already is in its natural state. That's a whole nother discussion. Let's not get sidetracked. Because that being of light is already there, the way the butterfly is already in the caterpillar. Not in a mechanical sense, but in the sense that it isn't separate or different from the caterpillar, right? In fact, I'm thinking of an analogy I recently saw, which is a beautiful meme, and I'm, spiritually, respectfully envious that I didn't create it myself. But this womb that we summarily dismiss as a place, a womb is alive, a place is not. This womb is like our species-wide chrysalis. And we are caterpillars becoming a butterfly at a species-wide genetic level. Therefore, I humbly submit to you, friends, anyone on social media claiming to be enlightened is either misled, confused, has been sold a bunk bill of bad goods. That was like a train wreck of 4 different sayings that I was trying to pick one and it didn't come out right. Because, and I've yet to find anyone capable of taking me up on this offer. And by the way, the offer is only legit during official business hours, which are from noon to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Because I don't mean to disrespect anyone. I don't know whether or not there is a walking Buddha among us. And there's a whole nother subject, folks. Put a pin in it. I've talked about it before on the show. Go dig around. You'll find it. It's probably not in any of the titles. It's one of those things that swoops in and needs to be talked about in the middle of other episodes. But you'll find it. Just think of this as a time travel show where you go back and revisit the past. And go forward into the future as well, a little bit. What was I saying? Damn it. I hate it when that happens. Chrysalis, cocoon, species-wide. Oh, right. Respectfully, without judgment, whoever is out there claiming to be enlightened, I offer this sincere, humble, respectful invitation. Fire up your entire multi-chakra system. There's more than the typical ones depicted in the posters and the memes and stuff. There's the chakra system has got layers, folks. It works in not chromatics. It works in it's a musical term. It's not coming up. But there's scales, right? Is it chromatic? There could be chromatic scales. That's a descriptor. But it's scalar in its function. It's fractal, in other words. So, what is it? 7, the fundamental 7 that we're all familiar from root to crown. That's not the extent of the system. That's just like the primary big ones. Okay? There's fractal layers within fractal layers going on in that system, and I don't pretend to be an expert. My humble invitation is anybody out there claiming to be enlightened right now on social media, fire up those chakras, extend them fully to the maximal system limit, activate your Merkaba, your chariot of light, and let me pause here. And this is a critical statement. I guess it could come off as judgy. The stand-up comedian in me would lean into the judgy attitude for the funsies, but I say this with love. It is astonishing to me, and I haven't figured out the wording for this meme, but a lot of people out there don't know what the fuck a Merkaba is, and it shows. And y'all not awake if you don't know what that is. Sorry. It doesn't work that way. Not if you're talking about capital A, awakening, becoming an enlightened one, transmuting your physical form into the next evolutionary stage of transitioning in gradient levels to becoming a pure being of light. In other words, when Christ was assumed, when Buddha vanished, etc., 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 because those are just my 2 favorite examples. They graduated, to borrow a term from education. They elevated, they ascended, they were assumed up into the next layer of the multiplex of systems that life exists in. This living aquarium, this living life tank we call a place that we dismiss as planets and stars and da-da-da, right? And there, they have other work to do as they continue to refine the lingering mundane aspects of the material body until they are free of it, or it has been completely transmuted. So if you can't fire up your Merkaba and show up to my office hours so I can interview on the other side of my desk right here in my studio, I hate to break it to you, but you ain't an enlightened master. You might be a really well indoctrinated student of a particular school, of a particular interpretation of the organic wisdom, and there's nothing wrong with that. but don't go calling yourself enlightened. Now, the moment somebody materializes because they've teleported through time-space using their Merkaba to humbly say, hello, namaste, I'm accepting your invitation for an interview, I will gladly sit down and say, what am I wrong about? Please tell me what I'm not getting right. Because I don't pretend to be right. I'm just telling you where I think things don't make sense, right? And where I think things make sense, and in that gap, I see other things. Here's what I see. I see that during the last several decades worth of mainstreaming of spiritual ideas, teachings, wisdoms, traditions, the stereotypical encroachment of corruption, incompetence, and ego trap, perpetuation. The perpetuation of ego trap thinking has encroached, has crept in everywhere, and in some circles taken over. Just like there are Christian churches that celebrate their sacraments while armed to the teeth with military-grade weapons because Jesus wants you to shoot everybody or something. There are also spiritual people who are traveling down misguided ego paths of like imposter spirituality. Now, I'm not the judge, right? I'm not the litmus test of who is enlightened. I'm not pretending to know any more than what I'm earnestly sharing, right? I don't know any deep secrets besides those that I've already talked about, I think. And if I haven't talked about them, it's not because I'm withholding them. Like Terence McKenna, every time I've ever had a deep spiritual experience in which I felt the opportunity to make a request was given to me by that which we call the spirit realm or whatever, I've asked for permission to speak openly and to be informed of that which is considered secret information that everyday people need to know. And I'm not getting a lot of high-level stuff, right? Like, I'm not trying to compete with centuries-old occultist clubs. They're all on their own track, and they may or may not be doing something that needs to be done or that is part of the journey. But here's what I do know. There are indeed those out there who would rather see humanity as a whole totally ignore, neglect, and ultimately forget about their spirituality. And I don't mean dogma or ideology or school of thought. I mean their intrinsic spiritual qualities. There are those that profit on keeping us ignorant, willfully ignorant of the reality that this is not a place, but a living womb giving birth to us. We are not just talking meat bags. We are the consciousness of the cosmos that has distilled itself into matter to be embodied and explore the infinite probabilities available in this material spectrum. Ultimately, if there's like a message, a counterpoint that I feel like I'm called to bring in terms of this particular issue, it's this. We're not here to argue about who's awake. We're not here to worship people who claim to be awake. We're not here to make money off of becoming awakened. We're not here, although it's not necessarily inherently bad to create a spiritual business. Hell, I'm doing it, right? We're not here necessarily exclusively to become spiritual billionaires, just the way Christian preachers are not here to become billionaire Christian preachers. We are here to be human. The problem is we've made up a bunch of really insane ideas of what that is supposed to be. And those are toxic. They are strangulating us spiritually. There's a lot of deep interconnected issues there, which we will have to save some time in another episode for, and or find ways to interconnect with previous episodes that have already addressed those subjects. But I want to get to this sort of counterpoint that I want to say. And if you disagree, that's great. We can have a discussion about it, but I'm not here to fight people about it. Right? I'm just here to say, look, if you're that enlightened, come visit me in my studio respectfully and without freaking anybody out during my office hours. Been saying that on the air, on and off for 4 years, and in public discourse for longer. Hitherto, no one has materialized with their activated Merkaba. Now, does that mean no one walking among us is enlightened? I don't know. To the best of my understanding, I'm totally sidetracking myself. Hold that thought. Let me come back to this counterpoint, right? The counterpoint to all of this faux awakened ego trap that's circulating is this, in my humble opinion. The remembering let me just say it. I am not awake. You are not awake. They are not awake. But together, we can all unite in the process of the transcendental evolutionary progress of our awakening. I really overwordified that. I have a simpler version of it in meme form. I'm not awake, you're not awake. Together, we are awakening. Don't take my word for it. Go and find out for yourself, obviously. But question every form of awakening and every claim of awakening and every description of awakening, right? Question it critically. Think about it and then set it aside. Don't buy into it. Don't worship somebody for being awakened and hope that worshiping them will rub off on you, right? Like, I'm not seeking followers. I want to build a community. I want to build a community where we have an audience, purveyor of arts relationship, for sure. But I don't want you to blind faith believe every fucking crazy thing that I say. I want to have a conversation about them. And I want to address this concern, right? Because this escalation of people posting the sentiment that they are themselves enlightened, but others around them are not worthy and have not been chosen to become elite special awakened ones, that's holding us all back, folks. Everyone's path along the journey, the collective journey towards awakening, is going to be unique and unto their own. None of us are here to judge anybody else's path. All of us are here to be human, to suffer, and to strive to alleviate that suffering. To be human and engage with our pain. To commune with our generational spiritual trauma, which we have tragically been ignoring and neglecting for a very long time. We are not here to become awakened celebrities. We are here to facilitate the species-wide evolutionary process of transmutation into the next phase of our existence. And like I said, at some point in the last 4 years, it's the one thing I allow myself to get absolutist in nature about. It's either all of us or none of us, my friends. So if you're busy, or if you see other people busy patting themselves on the back, talking about how woke they are, and peddling their wares, and not contributing to the internal, nonverbal, energetic, spiritual work required to heal themselves, their family, their community, their neighbors, their nation, and the species at all, then they're peddling something, and it's probably bunk. They may have had some fascinating deep, insightful spiritual experiences. And there's a lot of that going on. That's happening to people whether or not they bought this person's book or that person's course on the internet. Because it is an organic process. All of this talk of some people are worthy and some people are not, that is self-superiority, ego trap programming. Where does it come from? Ourselves. We can sit around wasting time pointing fingers and labeling people over there and over there as the bad guys. But it comes from within. From the damaged part of our collective, species-wide, spiritual, communal being. For we are one as much as we are individuals. Those are not separate polemics. They're two sides of the same coin. Awakening, in my humble opinion, is not a selection process for those who are more special than the rest. In my humble opinion, awakening is in fact an infinite fractal evolutionary process that is inclusive, collective of the entire human species, collectively inclusive of the entire human species. No one can awaken you. Only you can do your internal research to discover what needs healing. And from there, you foster your spiritual growth. That's today's nugget of Zen, folks. I'll leave you with DJ Zed's Minimalist Beats Still Rock, a deep techno remix live audio asset for your enjoyment. Namaste, my friends. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. Remember to look within, for that is where the revolution is happening. Not sure where to start? Consider this. Healing begins with forgiveness. Start there. And I know the first knee-jerk response is, what do I need to forgive? What do I need to be forgiven for? Tune in to future episodes where we do some, and past episodes, I believe I've talked about it before, where we talk about forgiveness, what it is, what it isn't, and why we need to invest in it as a practice, as well as the return of the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's totally irrelevant media reviews and the debut of even more gimmicks and special sub-segments of the show. Be sure to check out my art over on Behance. Just go to behance.com look up Mr. Zeppo. My sci-fi adventure dystopian literary works over on Wattpad.com. And my social media. Let's I was going to close with something strong and it just kind of puttered out. What was I thinking? I don't know. Anyways, I didn't mean for this kicker to go on for so long. Thank you as always, friends. Namaste.